And I'm sure I'm going to get every hater in the world telling me, from reading my title, the exact opposite. But people who care about the military will want to fix it. And that means making some very drastic changes, not just going along with, the status quo. That's what's killing the military. And people need to start speaking out about it and not getting intimidated by those who are attempting to silence you by discrediting you. Because that's what happens in today's world. As soon as you say something that goes against the current, they try to silence you in that way. So
Battle Line podcast, and we have a great guest for you guys. Amber Smith, Kiowa pilot, author of Danger Close, also has another book coming up, and I think you're gonna get a lot out of this interview.
Yeah, we should. She's a tremendous pilot. She served in both theaters, Iraq and Afghanistan, and I just I admire. I always admire the pilots. I admire those guys because they really did keep us, those of us on the ground, safe. I mean, they were our angels in the sky. So I really am looking forward to hearing, at least some of her stories. And then, of course, she used to be big into politics. So, we'll get into a little bit of that too. And I know she's going to be pretty outspoken with all the politics. Cause I mean, that was her bread and butter for years after the military. So yeah, looking forward to it, man.
Absolutely. So before we get into everything, man, the holidays are soon approaching. The funny thing is, it's one of those years where I know this. So, you look at the calendar, and the Hebrew calendar is always different than the standard calendar. And there are years where Hanukkah lands right around Christmas. This is one of those years where the week you hear this, it's going to be Hanukkah and then Christmas. So no matter what you're celebrating, I would say a great stocking stuffer, a great present. You cannot go wrong with anything from Ned, especially that relief balm. The relief balm is a lifesaver. It is the best stuff out there. And I said it before on podcasts, during the colder months, I am using that stuff a lot, and it helps and keeps me still going to the gym and staying fit.
Well, and me getting older, guys, the arthritis is starting to sit in my joints, and that relief balm. In fact, I just used some today. I'm recovering from my knee surgery, but the opposite, the hip, has been really hurting my good side because of all the having to use it to overcompensate for that injury. And I use some on my hip today, and it knocks that pain out like that. And then also on my joints and my fingers. And it's tremendous. And if you like that cool feeling, that relief balm has that menthol, that Tiger Balm kind of smell to it.
But it's like Tiger Balm times 10, I feel like, because you put it on, you put it on, you don't feel it at first, and then you're wow, this is powerful.
It feels good. But it's excellent. And it does it. I've had that one jar last forever. I mean, unless you're just scooping it, but you just need a little bit. You don't need that much. And that jar has lasted me 6 months, and I've been using it almost regularly. So it's fantastic. Great stuff. Another great product from Ned, but all their products are great.
Yeah, absolutely. Whether you're getting the CBD oil, the brain blend, all of their stuff is incredible. So go to helloned.com/battleline. You'll get the best deal at checkout for being a listener of ours. That's HELLONED.com/battleline.
From Kansas City to New York City, from planet Earth to extraterrestrial life in space, a podcast with no equal, engaged in unconventional warfare through your speakers and headphones. This is a show about embracing the suck, conquering your demons, and finding God in the face of adversity. Chris Tonto Peranto.
Switch is on. Motherfucker, I'm gonna shoot you in the face.
Ian Scotto.
Ian and I have been dating for a long time.
You are now tuned into the Battle Line Podcast.
The Switch is on, Battle Line podcast. Very honored to have on with us Army combat helicopter pilot Amber Smith, flew the Kiowa Warrior in Iraq and Afghanistan, former senior Pentagon official during the Trump administration, author of Danger Close, which is not, at this point, this is an older book. I know you have a new book coming out in the coming year. And before we even get into anything, I'll tell you this. You are someone I've been meaning to have on the show for a long time. But the reason it came up more recently is because Chris and I did a Q&A show. And I remember someone asked you, Chris, would you ever have your kid? How would you feel about your kids joining the military? And you said, if they went the special operations route, I'd feel good about that. And being that you have a daughter, I was like, well, I assume she's not going to be an Army Ranger or Navy SEAL. And then you said, well, I'd want her to go the helicopter pilot route. And I was like, we got to get Amber Smith on. So it's great to have you on.
Well, thanks for having me.
Of course. We get into it. Talk freely, say what you want. Like I said, drop an F-bomb every once in a while, and we'll do it for Kirk Lippold, since we got him to do one. You got to at least do two. But to go through this and just to start, I love starting at the beginning, because I'm hoping we'll have you on again. If the conversation goes well, and me and Ian, we already like you. I'm kidding, but I'd like to start just how you joined the military, because we do have a big listenership, and we do have like my daughter, women who listen and want to join the service or are thinking about it, and having ideas of what pushed you in and what pushed you to that route, or would you something totally different? Did you not join to be a pilot? Did you join for something else, and then God works mysterious ways, and you just kind of worked your way to flying helicopters?
Certainly, I had, I think, sort of a unique upbringing in terms of I was surrounded by pilots. My dad was a pilot. My mom was a pilot. My uncle was a pilot. My grandfather was a pilot. My dad had this grass airstrip where we grew up, and it was just the topic of conversation on a daily basis. My dad he served. He was in the 82nd Airborne in the 60s. And then he went on when he got out to become a airline pilot for Pan Am, and so we loved it. We grew, it was his passion, it was just a dream of his that he turned into reality. And I grew up seeing that, and would sort of fly recreationally with him since as long as I can remember. But I took, and we were very patriotic. We loved the military. We loved the red, white, and blue. My dad was a veteran. My grandfather was a veteran. My great grandfather was a veteran.
Oh, wow.
My great grandfather served in World War I. My grandfather, World War II.
Wow. Which, by the way, it's in this country, it's hard to even find people who have been in the U.S. whose family have been there that long. So.
That is awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's sort of this long, lineage of military veterans. And for me, it was always something that I thought about, oh, that'd be so cool if someday I did that. But it was never that was my path and it was crystal clear. Instead, I went to college and did the normal route. I actually was a college cheerleader, University of Washington. And so a little bit different, I guess, than most people's paths.
It is, but actually it's kind of similar to your route, Chris.
Well, yeah, that's Fort Lewis. That's where I ended up. The cheerleader, not the cheerleader.
Not the cheerleader, but I just mean to go to college.
Well, I would have if I could jump. I couldn't jump. I had to play football. I couldn't do flips. So I played. I had to go. I couldn't do it. So I played college football instead, because I couldn't do all the. I tried. Believe me, I should have stayed with it. But yeah, I didn't know you grew up in Washington. So that's where you grew up, was Northwest.
Yeah. Born and raised Southern Washington State, and so went to college in Seattle right out of high school, and 9/11 happened, and I was definitely one of those college kids where I was completely lost, had no idea what I wanted to do. When you go to college, everyone's oh, you must have your life figured out, and you know exactly what path you're going to take. And I was the exact opposite. I couldn't even decide what I wanted to major in. So 9/11 happened for me, and that made what I wanted to do completely crystal clear for me. It woke me up, and I was I took my love of aviation and love of country, and I was I want to join the military. I want to be a military pilot. I went to all the different branches, and I was I want to be a military pilot. And they were all and I didn't go to the Army. I was like, they don't fly. Like I'm not going to fly for the Army. And every single recruiter was like, you want to be a military pilot? Cool. Like you and the rest of the world, like come back after you've graduated and talk to us then. So then just by default, I went to the Army, and because I just didn't know. My dad was in the infantry. He was, and I just sort of always viewed probably how most people do, you know, like there's just like a ground branch, like not big on aviation, but actually the Army has a massive aviation
Oh
program.
yeah. You didn't know about the Night Stalkers or nothing? I mean, seriously, that's being a pilot, Kiowa War pilot, and you didn't. I'm not knocking you at all, but holy
My
shit.
Army aviation like sort of experience and knowledge happened once I got into it. Definitely not before. And because my dad had been, like I said, Army infantry, so that was kind of more like the soldier side of things. And then my grandfather was a pilot in the Army Air Corps, which is, you know,
which became the Air Force.
The Air Force,
yes.
Actually branched into the Air Force. And so I always just was like Air Force pilots, Army ground guy stuff.
And of course, everybody thinks Top Gun, Navy pilots.
I think it's a common misnomer. But like I said, I went and I spoke to the Army recruiter, and they had a program that was perfect for me. And I went, and I was a little like apprehensive in terms of I'd never been in a helicopter before. And I was like, the commitment was usually around 8 years, because you did 2 years of flight school and then you had a 6-year commitment to the military. So I was like, that's a large chunk of time. I want to go fly in a helicopter and make sure that it's my thing before I, you know, sign on the dotted line. So I went and I flew in this little like rinky-dink Robinson 22. It's like a 2-seater, very small, teeny helicopter.
Those are like the MASH. Those are like the old, and you'll see in the old shows, right? The old MASH.
Yeah.
Just the bubble, and they've got the
bubble with a tail boom.
Yeah, that's it. Holy crap.
It's so little. And went up with this guy for 20 minutes. I begged my parents to pay $60 so I could go fly with him for 20 minutes at this air show. And I always tell them, still to this day, it's the best $60 they've ever spent on me, because like I couldn't stop smiling when I got out of the helicopter and like ran across the taxiway. I was like, sign me up. I'm ready. Like, this is what I want to do. And I'm so happy I did. Like, my love of Kiowas didn't come until obviously later in flight school, but I knew I wanted to fly rotary wing after that flight.
And you know what I wanted to say too about this book in particular, and like I said, I mean, you're really not on necessarily to promote the book because it's been out for years at this point, and I think people will be excited to hear about the second book. But what stood out is that if I speak to most of the military guys in the show, or women, and you ask them about significant events, they'll be like, oh, was that 2012? Was that 2013? Everything in here you date pretty precisely. So did you keep a diary from getting into the military to going to combat? Because like, yeah, you have July 12th, this, and you have it all pretty much, you know, the timeline is accurate.
Yeah. So I had a journal that I kept, as well as emails. So my emails were sort of like my second, like, modern day journal that I was able to like remember so much. When you write things down and then you come back later, it just sparks your memory on so many different events where, you know, if you don't have that, it gets lost. It's also similar to like, Chris, you know, when you hang out with like your former Army buddies, and it's like you just like the war stories just like start coming out, and you're like, I haven't thought about this in years, or whatever. It's kind of the same like when you read like a journal, even if it's not like as, you know, like super detailed or specific, it's like, oh yeah, I remember all of this, and it brings it all back for you.
So was it a plan? I mean, or did you just you just got lucky? You just got like, holy crap, I got all this material, wasn't planned on it. Let's put it in a book.
And in fact, I had been sort of approached years before, like right when I got out of the military, about like book writing. And I was like, no, I was like putting myself out there and sort of being public about my experiences that were still very new to me, because I didn't get out until 2010. And I was just I was terrified of the thought of sort of being vulnerable, I guess, of like putting yourself out there with some of those stories. And at least my experience for me with like the military that I was in and in the unit I was in, it was like you very much had to have like a wall up in terms of like how you operated. And so putting myself out there as a person was just very uncomfortable for me. And so I wasn't interested in it at all. And it wasn't until later when I sort of got into writing like publicly, like commentary analysis of national security and defense issues, and then even more so into the TV world, because that's kind of just something you accept when you put yourself out there with your analysis, that it just sort of warms me up to telling my story through my book. And I then again had people tell me like, there's so few female Kiowa pilots, nobody even knows what a Kiowa is, like you have to write your story and tell it. And by then I was open to it.
Well, how did you go to getting the Kiowa? I don't want to jump too far ahead because I do want to get into your training, because there's always great stories in training. I mean, I got shitloads of great stories from training that you remember, just being that new pilot, new lieutenant, new private, whatever you are. But so going into that, you when you signed up, you hadn't graduated college yet, correct? Or you were just, okay. So what year were you? What were junior, senior year? And
no, I was my sophomore year, and I didn't graduate. I joined. I decided I didn't want to wait, and that's I didn't want to do with those other branches. Was they all told me to wait? They were like, graduate and then come back and talk to us. So
how did that work? Did you get a direct commission, or did you have to enlist? And then
I was a warrant.
You're a warrant. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So what, you got to be a warrant, right? That ain't fair. I wasn't offered that shit. What kind of crap is it for Ian? So you don't know.
To get me to be a crew chief. They tried to get me to enlist to become a crew chief.
I think that's was going to ask you next.
Yes, because recruiters they don't get like the same amount of points if they do, if you go straight in as a warrant officer. And so, but I was like, absolutely not. My dad was enlisted and he was like, no, like, they'll try to talk you into this, but be adamant about the warrant officer program. And they do. They have a civilian like straight into the warrant officer flight program. You just have to go to basic training and then warrant officer candidate school, and then you start flight school. So it's like a very specific track.
And that's a big deal. You don't hear that a lot. I mean, very rarely do you have a lot. You think they told me? They didn't tell any of us idiots about what. No, you're enlisted. You want to be ready?
Promote. It's not something that they promote. And but my parents knew some pilots, both fixed wing and rotary wing from Vietnam, that were warrant officers. Okay. And that's sort of what led us to even knowing about the program. And honestly, the availability for it, so the opportunities are very rare. Like I went in oh my gosh, 2001? No, 2003. Sorry, it's a long time ago. 20 years ago. Oh my gosh. And so yeah, that was rough for me. But anyway, okay, 2003, I joined the military right before the Iraq War kicked off. Gotcha. And so they knew, they sort of like opened that program up where like maybe in a year they would take usually 10 or something like that. It was like then 10 a month. Like they significantly increased those numbers because, Afghanistan had already kicked off and then Iraq was about to kick off. So they increased those numbers, which then opens up the opportunity to be able to do that.
So what was the experience going through when you got through basic training? You're going to college, going to basic. Where'd you go to basic at, if you don't mind me asking?
Jackson.
Fort Jackson. Okay.
Relax in Jackson.
Relax in Jackson. Yeah, that's good. That's it. Jackson, piece of cake. Fort Jackson. That's easy. But how was that? And then going down to Alabama. I mean, you still went to Rucker, right? You went from Jackson to Rucker, just like that. So how was all that training?
You got a bus and they drive you from, or a van. It was like a small, it was like just like the aviation, MOSs that went from Jackson to Fort Rucker. And so, so I was at Fort Fort Jackson, South Carolina from like January 2003 to March 2003, then went to Warrant Officer Candidate School, which is about 8 weeks or 6 weeks, but I had 2 weeks of a kind of hold. So I just sat there. And then I think I was in another bubble for a little bit before I started flight school. And then flight school was a little over a year for me, maybe 13 or 14 months, maybe.
Was there any culture shocks, anything? I mean, I still remember in 95 going in, and it was like Full Metal Jacket in the 90s when in that night. I mean, but do you have any stories like that where you're just like, holy shit, I made a bad decision? Or was it always just, you know what, I got this. This is what I want to do. This is great. And you're just fitting like a square peg in can you say square hole? Can a hole be square? I don't know.
Yeah, it was like a square,
Okay.
because you were about to say square peg and around. I was like, that mean you don't fit.
Well,
but
that
okay.
was me. That was me. But yeah, was there anything? Man, this is
everything. I feel like I was a little bit, I grew up in this teeny tiny small town. I graduated high school with 92 people. I had 2 sisters, no brothers. And so I went, like I said, college cheerleader, like the college life, into like basic training too. You do, like I did 2 weeks of kind of like a hold as well. And that I was like, once you get into basic training, it's like you're on a schedule. You are like, you have things to do, you know?
well, yeah, there's structure. There is a structure that you can follow.
Like almost every minute of your day is basically planned out. And then, but when you're in this bubble, it's like the entire day is surrounded by eating. So like what days, okay, real life. And so but then you had like all this downtime, and that's when I was like, okay, is this what the Army is like? And then you go into basic training and it's like you actually learn things and develop skills. And then when I got to Fort Rucker, it was also really my first experience in the South and the humidity, and it was a whole lot different than I thought it was going to be. When you're in the like the training programs, like basic training or warrant officer candidate school, it's very like structured and the time goes by very quickly. In flight school, it was like there were milestones. Like first you start out in primary, which is where you fly in a TH-67. It's kind of like a Jet Ranger for those of you familiar with those types of helicopters. But you fly with something that I did love was that all the instructor pilots, or most of the instructor pilots, were old Vietnam era pilots. And so they had the best stories. Like I had one of my instructors, he flew L-19 bird dogs in Vietnam, and then he also flew Hueys as well. And he like would tell us stories about how like everybody, his like entire platoon, whatever, would be hungover one day, or like it was like a constant thing where they would always be like drinking, doing whatever, and he didn't drink. And so he got sick of everybody always being like hungover for however many days, and they stopped bringing the mail because no one could like fly the mail in because everybody was always so hungover. And so he finally just like basically didn't tell anyone, took an aircraft and like flew it to whatever closer city to get his mail, and then he came back and everybody loved him because he brought the mail. But just like the like 0 Fs given from those guys, like it was just awesome, like a different generation of the military. And it was just such an experience to learn to fly with those guys. They were awesome.
Do you think it was a culture shock for some of those older guys to have a female pilot?
Yes. It was it made some people very uncomfortable. Most of the people in flight school though, like the old Vietnam era guys, they were awesome. Like it was like flying with my dad. Like maybe they saw me, like maybe they had daughters their age. And so they didn't make it like weird. Like it was just, they treated me, I felt like the exact same as everybody else. When I got to my unit, actually, at Fort Campbell, there are some people that like were the opposite, like did not want me there, thought that my present made their job a little less cool, you could say, or like badass, or like they're like, so there were some people there, but at flight school, it's like, I think it's because there's no real hierarchy. Like we're all on the same playing field in terms of being a student. And so that's like from the instructors, I never experienced it, but I do think that they thought it was neat that I was there, I guess.
And I as instructors, you're going through a vetting process. There's standards, and if it makes, who gives a shit if you're female, male, black, white, red, yellow? These are the standards, and you got to meet them. And I think as instructors at the school, you could just, but then when you go to your unit, that's when the ideologies come. That's when some of the perceptions or like I come in, and it's hard for a lot of those sons of bitches to let that go, which it is.
Some kind of like, I feel like take me under their wing, sort of in terms of like, you know, this is what you're going to expect, or this is how things may be. And you like, they sort of just gave me tips in terms of being a woman, and like, you can sink or swim, and you're probably going to be the decision maker in terms of how you want your experience to be. And so that was helpful. Like, obviously it doesn't click until you get there and like have those experiences yourself in terms of how you react and how you sort of want to present yourself. Because believe it or not, now women in the military, 2023, it's not weird anymore. When I was in, you know, in the early 2000s, it was still, especially because I went to a CAV unit. Like I went to the aviation unit with the fewest females, where they were sort of more like larger numbers in sort of the LIFT units, like the Chinooks and the Blackhawks. But in the Kiowa units, in the CAV units, it was still pretty rare. So how was
that? I interrupt you there, but how was that when you got to that Kiowa units? What was it? And you can talk shit all you. This is what we're for. We always talk shit on this show.
Yeah.
When you got there, how did you lay it down? Did you have to sit somebody down, or did you ever have an altercation, whether it was verbal or physical? It's like, hey, motherfuckers, I'm here. Deal with it.
Eventually, I had that conversation, but I would say not for a while. I was still sort of drinking through a fire hose from flight school. You know, you come out of flight school with like a couple hundred hours max. And so you are as new and like green as can be in terms of, for me, I honestly had like a little bit of experience aviation wise under my belt, because I had my private pilot's license and a fixed wing before I went into the military. And like I said, I knew how to speak aviation. I grew up around it, and then had Army flight school. What I didn't have was any Army experience. I didn't know how to speak the language. Like I didn't know anything about anything when it comes to the Army. Like I remember one of the hardest things for me was I was surrounded by prior enlisted. So people who were like a decade older than me that were all E6s and above. And I was not. I had no experience, like just like the simple things like uniform regs and PT type stuff. Like it was all brand new to me. And my peers had years and years and years of experience, and some of them had deployed, even though it was still fairly early on in both wars. So it was a lot at first. So when I first got to my unit, I don't know if it was like a defense mechanism, but I like sort of walked in being like, I'm going to be given like everybody's going to treat me like just like normal. Like I'm not weird as like a 22-year-old like young woman walking in. But that kind of wasn't the case. Like I quickly learned that just for myself, I couldn't think that was the way it was going to be, or I was going to get absolutely destroyed. So you kind of learn to stand up for yourself pretty quickly. But like I got the I think I got some unique sort of like initiation type things because like most of the guys that came with me from flight school or relatively around the same time, like I said, they were all the prior enlisted. They knew all the tricks that I was not aware of. So I got all the go find the rotor wash type jokes, go find a grid square.
Grid square, grid square. Yep.
All
Yep.
the like, here, let me write this down for you. You have to go to this office because they're the ones that like this QC office. They are expecting this. We go in and ask it for it all the time. So all of that type of stuff.
Oh, and that's normal. I mean, I
Yeah.
got the Chem Light batteries. Where the Chem, I fell for that one when I but, getting it. But did you feel like you came open minded? You really had that open mind, or were you were really, or were you just like, holy shit, you know, I'm gonna get fucked with when I come in here, and that's just how it is.
I had a good sense of humor about it, and like there was guys that were like having fun with it. There were like the assholes, and then there were the guys that were just being funny and having fun and you know, like having a good time. There was a clear difference, and I knew
Yes.
who those guys were. And eventually I learned to tell guys to go fuck themselves. And as soon as I was able to do that, you know, they kind of lightened up a bit and they were like, okay, Amber has a line. We should all probably like adhere to that, like in terms of not going past that. But I mean, you learn to make it work and you learn to not draw attention to yourself because just by default being a young 20 female, it was already there. So like I got very accustomed to when I heard hey in a parking lot, like I never stopped and turned around and looked. Like I just kept walking. So you like learn ways to like try to blend in, even though that's not actually something that really ever happens, like walking into a DFAC in a deployment, especially on a small little like
The guys are I've been that too. It's like, holy shit, there's a woman here, there's 100 of us. Holy
like,
crap.
that, like strange circus animal that just like walked into this like place. That's like the stops. And like sooner or later you like it's like very uncomfortable at first. And then it's like though you just stop looking. Like you honestly like you just like look straight ahead and it's
now, in
and
our
I don't want people to think that that's like a conceited thing to say. Like ask any female that has ever been in a like combat zone, like probably even like anybody, not just military. So it's just like a military thing that military people will get what I'm talking about.
I want you to know this. It was just a reaction. It wasn't, maybe for some guys it was creepy. For me, it was honestly, it was just a reaction. So I just it wasn't, at least for me, it wasn't creepy. It was just,
no, it wasn't intentional to like you feel bad. It was just like, I mean, there was, you know, few women around. So it's just the same way I got like whenever we would go out on missions, like a lot of men afterwards, like if I saw them in the DFAC, they would come up to me or just even walking down the road, they would be like, were you flying today? Like, were you out on a mission today? Are you Annihilator 2-4? And I would say yes. And they would be like, okay, like put a face to the name because we also hear so few female voices over the radio. So
in performance, I also get to next, you know, and get in because you got your training done and it takes a lot more, you know, it's just because of the show. We just don't have that much time to go into all the training, but doing that. And I already forget that you were young at the time and being 22-year-old warrant, you are right. That's abnormal. That's not most warrants. All the warrants that I knew from Ranger Battalion, we were E6s before we could go to warrant. And there was no way. So I didn't realize that had to be difficult because you weren't just, I mean, gender aside, just your age and then, not having to pay your dues. That's what I
always get the question like, oh, is it hard being a woman in the Army? And I'm like, you know, it wasn't just that. Like it was my age, it was being a young female, and it was the fact that I had no prior Army experience, like compared to people who were doing the same thing that I was.
That would
So-
have that would have got me. That would have been like, I don't give up. But shit, she's basically a work baby. She's done nothing but got here, and now and then I would have had to get by that, and I would have. And as soon as you told me, I'm the kind of guy you tell me to fuck off. All right, she's cool now. We're good. All right, we're friends now. So, and we'll get into more. But
Yeah, no, I
was
was
cool
going
to
to get
hear.
into the combat stuff, of course, which is the mainly what's in this book itself, and it actually sounds like, based on what you were saying of why you wanted to join post 9/11, it sounds like a lot of the other really guys who come on the show who, when they go into combat, say, hell yeah, this is what I joined for, which is what civilians like myself are in amazement of. But that's how it sounds.
In like headed over and actually deploying and going to combat.
Yeah, but it doesn't sound like, I think a lot of people would think, wow, I'm terrified of going to war. I mean, the logical reaction that most people would have, it sounds like the fact that you joined post 9/11, you were like, okay, this is what I came here for. I'm going into Iraq. I'm going into Afghanistan.
So what was on your mind? Yeah, when you found out my unit's going, what was that? How was the stomach? How did the bubbles come? How did the nerves go?
I think for me, so my unit, I was Alpha Troop 217 Cav at Fort Campbell, in the 101st Airborne Division and CAB, Combat Aviation Brigade. So my unit had just gotten home when I got there. So they had already been to Iraq. And so there was like, when you like come home from a deployment, like everybody transfers out, like PCSs to different, like out of the military, retires, goes to different duty stations, goes to different schools. So it was like this constant like turnover before we settled really into our unit. But we knew we were going right back. So like I knew that we were headed over to Iraq, and it was kind of a super long year, like with that build up. Like all we did was train. It was almost, easier once we got in country into Iraq, because we could like just do our jobs then. And it wasn't just like this constant training. It was just like, we got to do the real thing. So I would say like I loved hearing the stories of the guys that had been over there. It was nice to sort of give me an idea, but I still like, you never know what it's really going to be like for you until you get over there and do it yourself. And so I remember like my first combat mission, and just being like taking off from the taxiway the first time, and like flying over the wire, and just being like, all right, like here we go, let's do this. And same thing, like when the first time you get shot at, or the first time, you hear the shots, or like the first time like an IED goes off like right below you when you're working with the ground guys, first medevac call, like all that kind of stuff. Then once it happens, and once you have experience in that, I think the unknown was the hardest part. So like once it actually happens, like for me, I was always like, I've heard other people's stories, but what am I gonna do when like bullets start flying at me? Like, what am I actually gonna do? Like, how will I respond? And then once that happens, and you get it, and you like your training kicks in, and you just do what you're supposed to do, and
You do your job.
Then,
You do your job.
and then you're like, okay, like I can do this. Like that takes and then you just weirdly get used to it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and that's the
you-
same
you-
thing that a lot of guys who've been on the show have said too. I mean, we recently had a pilot on who spoke about that. I mean, I know it's all detailed in the book, but for the audience, and I'm sure a lot of them will pick it up, any one combat story that stands out to you that like you will always remember and you think people get something out of?
Oh my gosh, I have
There's a lot of them, I know, and two different fields. So
Yeah.
with Iraq and Afghanistan.
Yeah, for me, I made pilot in command in Iraq towards the second half of the deployment. Pilot in command means you're in charge of the aircraft, like you're the commander of the aircraft. Before that, you're a PI, which is a pilot. And in Afghanistan, I had much more responsibility. I become an air mission commander, which is the commander of a team. So usually 2 aircrafts is how we flew in combat. You're the lead in a trail.
Yep.
So, yeah, Afghanistan was just like a much different war for me. It was a lot of like mountain flying, very close proximity to the enemy, just based on how we flew like so close in the mountains. I'll say one thing that stuck out for me was this was fairly new to arriving in country. We had just gotten in Jalalabad, and we did right seat, left seat, right seat rides in the Korangal. You've probably heard of the Korangal up the Pesh River Valley.
Yep.
And so there was a troops in contact, and we had just done our like entire mission block. So it was daytime transitioning into nighttime. We were in the FARP unloading our rockets, unloading our 50 cal, and getting gas, and we get this call for troops in contact, and we like kind of like talk to each other, and we're like, and this was up the Pesh, so it was probably like a good 15 to 20 minute flight, and we hadn't really done much since we had gotten there. Like I said, this was very early on, and we were like, another team was about to come on call, and we're like, nope, we're already in the flight, we got this. And so we like told the FARP guys, we're like, load us back up. They like load us up, and you do this, the like, let's go like now. And we picked up, and we max torque, and it was dark by then, so we were sort of like tired. You get tired from flying a helicopter for so many hours. Like the adrenaline kicks in, and I had a brand new left seater, which I feel for, because I've been in that position as like a brand new pilot and right in combat, and you have like the other pilot being like flying the helicopter, but also like putting in like the nav grid and telling him to write everything down that we're getting, like they're firing artillery right now, and get the hold line, make sure we know where it is on the map, like where we're not supposed to fly in. And then you hear a medevac coming in, and then you hear the ground guys who are like kind of frantic because they have a bunch of wounded and KIA, and they're calling in like Apaches that are in a different area of the airspace. And so there's so many moving parts and pieces. And so anyway, this was what was happening. We were flying up to Asadabad, which is up the Konar River Valley, and then you take a left into the Pesh River Valley, and it's like almost like a canyon is how you would describe it, because the mountains are so high and it's so steep that you're flying through these canyons, and the mountains are above you almost, and which puts you in not like kind of a vulnerable position for an aircraft. So the artillery starts firing, and we're holding, and it's just, I don't know how to describe it other than mad chaos. Like we are listening to 4 radios going off, talking at the exact same time, and you're kind of responsible for listening to certain ones. And then you have medevacs coming in, and finally you get cleared into the fight, and you're getting a grid from a ground guy, and they're shining IR lasers on the target. And we come in, and we like just like set up our pattern, and we just like lob rockets into the side of the mountain, which was the opening to the Korangal River Valley. They actually closed the Korangal to aircraft soon after we got there, because on a right seat, left seat ride, they were actually firing RPGs at the aircraft. It wasn't a flight that I was on, but they were just like, okay, we don't want, an aircraft going down like right when we get here. And so, yeah, ended up, it was, it's a story that's in my book. There was, I do believe it was like 3 or 4 enemy KIA, a medevac came in, picked up some of the wounded US forces, and then another Kiowa team came on station. We were like so low on fuel, like our when you get low on fuel, you get this bong that goes off in the helicopter, and it's just like bong 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 bong. But we made sure that we were able to make it back and get fuel. But
Did you end up going when you got there? Did you end up refueling and heading back, or do you just expend? And with the Kiowa, do you just expend all your rounds and then get out of there? Just like when we used to call Little Birds on station, they would dump everything and then we'd have another group come in and fly in. Is the Kiowa the same thing where just because of their size, and Apache can kind of hang on station a little bit, the Cobras can just. And maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. They carry more armaments. They're a little bit
you're
bigger
right.
aircraft.
We are limited on, we usually carried about 300 rounds of 50 cal. This is just standard. If we knew we were going to go do something different, then we would change our weapons load.
Okay.
But usually about 350 rounds of 50 cal, which doesn't go, you don't lose it as fast as you do with like a minigun.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Yes.
It's slower, yes. And then we also would carry like 4 rockets usually, 4 to 6 rockets. But we also like loaded up because we knew we were going in, which you then have to sacrifice fuel for. So if you take more ammo, you got to cut down on the fuel that you take on, which then changes your on station time. So one of the many struggles that the Army was faced with when trying to figure out what to do after the Kiowa, because the aircraft needed to be replaced, but it was just such a specific and effective mission for a war like Iraq and Afghanistan that the Kiowa did its job very, very well in those 2 theaters of operation. But to answer your question, we were relieved. We were also limited. We had been flying for a while. And so when we were in the FARC, when we got the troops in contact call, we, took off and went, but we knew we'd have to switch out because of fuel and ammo. So what we did was after we did that, and I feel like that wasn't that great of a combat story. Like we have so many, I just like,
that's
talk about them. So yeah, we were replaced by another Kiowa team that came in.
Yeah, that's just your humility. Everybody, and even myself, when I first told what happened, I was like, that's no big deal, because you see a lot of heroism when you're over there from everybody, and it's just, we go back to just saying like that was our jobs, that was your job, and but it is when somebody else hears it, when I hear it, and I can still imagine, I can even picture myself on the ground fucking IR and say, hey, I'm sparkling, hit that son of a bitch. And I mean, that's what I'm hearing, because that's what's when I'm hearing, like, there's that, I can hear those angels, those deaths from above are coming, man.
I think it's an awesome story. It's just you tell it in a calm manner because that's your demeanor, because of that's what you had to do as a pilot. Hope you guys are enjoying this interview with Amber Smith. Great having her on. Great hearing her speak candidly about so many things going on and also her time as a Kiowa pilot. But before we go any further, Fort Scott Munitions is a manufacturer of multi-federal patented solid copper and brass CNC spun ammunition that is designed to tumble upon impact in soft tissue, leaving devastating wound channels for faster bleed out and quicker incapacitation. This ammunition was originally developed to innovate and improve on the standard of military-grade ammunition design. It was found that not only did the TUI ammunition outperform competitors in the self-defense industry, but it quickly became apparent that it would be a top contender for hunters alike. With the ammunition being CNC spun, the tolerances are some of the tightest on the market, ensuring that you receive the same results with each pull of the trigger. I've got some in front of me right here. If you could pan to me, Harold, they still have these tins available on the site. And you are about to embark on yet another Fort Scott training course in just the next couple of days. Yeah. And I know you're going to be shooting a lot of these rounds downrange.
Another at the Fort Scott Munitions Battle Line Range out here in Fort Scott, Kansas. Have one thing with Photonus Defense on Sunday, a night vision course, and then also a defense concealed carry course with me on Battle Line on Saturday. And that's all we shoot is Fort Scott Munitions. Tremendous stuff. And they're making new ammunition. So if you do get a chance to go to SHOT Show, stop by their booth, and we'll talk about it again as they're developing new ammunition, new calibers, and new sizes all the time. So check them out, and they give us a great freaking deal too, if you buy it off their website.
Yes, and that deal is you're gonna get 15% off when you use the promo code BattleLine, and you could use that when you buy in bulk. I mean, it's gonna save you a lot.
Yeah.
So go to fsm.com, use the promo code BattleLine for 15% off. Only available to listeners of the BattleLine podcast. Fort Scott Munitions is a proud supporter of Chris Peranto, BattleLine Tactical, and the BattleLine podcast. And now back to Amber Smith. You know what I wanted to ask you about? Because truthfully, I've heard a lot of this because I had the, opportunity to interview you years ago. And of course, the book has been out for a long time, Danger Close. But what I've never asked you about, because this is all after the fact, and, my introduction to you really was when I was working on Andrew Wilkow's show, The Wilkow Majority. You were a national security expert kind of all over the place on Fox News, on shows on Sirius XM. You put out the book. And then you get asked to be a part of the Trump administration with General Mattis. I mean, a man that I definitely greatly respect. How did that all come about? And I mean, that must have been a culture shock of I'm this, military pilot, and now I'm working for the presidential administration.
It was quite the contrast of being sort of on the operational military level, like fighting in combat, and then going to the E-ring of the Pentagon and working, with the most senior people at the Pentagon. But I got asked to be the press secretary for the GOP convention for basically the Trump team. It's kind of split into the candidate and then the RNC. And so I did that. And from there, I went on to the transition teams with both DOD and VA, and then ended up going to DOD after the inauguration in January of 2017. And I was there for 27 and 2018. And it was, like you said, quite the eye-opening experience to the red tape and bureaucracy and politics at the Pentagon.
How did you deal with that? Besides trying to just punch somebody in their face, because that's what I did. I couldn't work it. There's no way in hell I could ever be around any of that again. I would not want to be around any of that shit ever again. But
I mean, it was tough because you probably heard the stories about, when the Trump officials came into the different agencies, there were people crying in the hallways because
Yeah, I remember all that. Yep.
No, but that was accurate. People were not happy that we were there. And it was the Pentagon is so massive that it's the bureaucracy was created of so many layers that it is almost impossible to make change in the amount of time that you have. You meet such resistance because people don't like change, and people that work here just want to go about their day and do their daily, and change changes that, and they don't, and many people don't like that. Even well-meant people, it's just they get used to the way that they operate, and unfortunately the way that we have operated for decades isn't working anymore, and it doesn't like innovation. And I saw that firsthand, and I really didn't like it, but it was also made so much sense to me in terms of what we're seeing with today's military and some of the problems that exist. Sorry about that.
No, bless you.
So it people who thrive in those environments, good for you, but I could not do something like that long term. I'm much more of let's disrupt things and break things and get it done. So I'm not made to be a bureaucrat by any means.
It's funny when you're talking about the red tape and all that. I listen to so many podcasts with different people, and I've heard people in the Trump administration, who were on the same level but doing different things than you. I've heard interviews with Amanda Milius, and she says the exact same thing that you're saying. It was extremely hard to make change because of all the red tape there. Well, what I was wondering too is what was it like working with General Mattis? Because I thought the way that he handled the press was so great, in that they constantly tried to get him to answer questions about whatever scandal was going on with Trump. And he was great that he would always say, I'm the Secretary of Defense, I handle war. If it has nothing to do with war, don't ask me this. Like, and I loved that about him.
Yeah, he would he actually didn't do much media. So he did not
Purposely, though, it seemed like
Yes.
he did his best not to do a lot of media.
Yes, he was not interested in sort of being a spokesperson whatsoever. I do think that ended up sort of working out for him in his favor because the media that he did end up doing, he got some great one-liners out of. Like you probably
Yeah.
remember when they said, "What keeps you up at night?" and he was like, "Nothing keeps me up at night. I keep other people up at night." Like, come on, that's a great line. And so like, but then people remember him for stuff like that and not necessarily like the fallout at the end of his time as SecDef. So
Yeah.
not for sure.
What I really need to tell you this. I don't pay attention outside from doing the media. 2017, I think is the last year I ever did any big media. But I do remember that fallout. What happened? I mean, you were
I
there.
was lucky gone. I left earlier in the year for when that happened, but I think it was like from what I hear, it was basically the fallout with like the withdrawal from Syria and the Kurds and you know, Trump had given an order and so had NSC for some time over to the Pentagon that like it was almost like they didn't want to believe that what Trump said was true and he was going to hold them to it, like in terms of like, no, we're getting out of the Middle East. And so when Trump finally like drew the line and said, why are we not out of the Middle East? I've given you, you know, Syria specifically. And so, you know, they both say two different things.
Which I have a question for you regarding that, because you're one of the few people we've spoken to who's been on the inside, even though, as you said, you left prior to the end of the administration. But pretty much, it's funny. Last show we were saying that the military is not a monolith. When we have people on, you're going to hear a million different opinions. But I would honestly say, by and large, pretty much every military person we've had on the show thinks that the withdrawal from Afghanistan was a disaster. But Trump was going to withdraw from Afghanistan as well. Do you have any inside knowledge of like how he would have done things differently that we wouldn't have left all the equipment over there? Because a lot of people would also say there was no good way of withdrawing and it would have been a disaster no matter what.
So I think what would have been different is he would have left a sizable amount of a force to prevent the Taliban from taking Kabul or Bagram, in order to get our people out, in order to get our equipment out, and in order to get the like SIV, like the interpreters, the people who had worked with us, the American citizens, to get out. That's what I think would have been different. Would the outcome of Afghanistan been different in terms of the Taliban taking over? No, I have said that I've been shouting that from the rooftops for years and years prior to the withdrawal. I've been such an advocate to get out of Afghanistan. Because of the way we ran the war, because of the strategy for what we were doing. We were no longer there to win the war. So I said, no, we don't need more American, 20-year-olds dying because we don't have a strategy to actually win something, because that wasn't what we were there to do anymore.
Yeah.
And so once that happened, I said it was time to go. And President Trump and the Trump administration got that it was a losing game. The outcome of Afghanistan was going to be the same, which was a Taliban ruling Afghanistan. The only difference was the withdrawal. Like, how were we going to go about it? I do think it would have been different if Trump had a little bit more time to do that. But I like, there were hundreds of American citizens left behind. So many of our SIV visa holders and interpreters, and just the optics, the sort of like information that gave our adversaries in terms of the withdrawal and how we handled it. It was about as, awful as you can get, as everybody saw in real time.
Oh yeah, I'll say it was a clusterfuck is what it was. Dang, there was. And I was lucky enough to spend a lot of time there as well. And yeah, we did those people that helped us to service. We were able to, we did get a few interpreters that I know, but I've lost 2 that I at least I think I don't know what happened to them. I no clue. But you know, I agree with you. You know, we weren't going to be there forever. I'm not an Everest War guy. I don't think there's a lot of guys that have served that are Everest War guys, but we should have done it more tactically. We shouldn't have left all of our shit there. And now we don't have that advantage, and we put our future soldiers, our future airmen, our future pilots at a disadvantage, because now our enemies have all those night vision capabilities, have all of our technological advances that we left there. And I don't think that's something that's not talked about. And I don't know why.
Yeah. How about the biometric data that was
Holy crap. Yeah.
behind for like basically everyone we had ever worked with, any civilians that had worked
Yeah.
with the military, people who had worked on bases, like stuff like that, like it was just left behind, like databases given to the Taliban because of the information that was left behind. And it was just really unreal that happened. And it's crazy because it seems like so many top level generals kind of just folded, like in terms of when the investigations were happening afterwards, and when they testify in front of Congress, it was like, well, I mean, like Milley for like, it was just like they all contradicted themselves. So you have like General McKenzie saying they like had to leave Bagram because that was an order of President Biden because of how many troop levels were allowed to be in country. And because it was so low, they weren't still able to hold Bagram. So they ended up leaving Bagram. Then you have Milley, the chairman of Joint Chief of Staff, completely contradicting him and being like, no. Kabul was always the plan. Kabul was always like how we were going to evacuate the country, because, you know, politics is like surrounded that job these days. And so it's just like they couldn't even get their own story straight.
And it bothers me when I hear it was an order. I'm just following orders. I'm just, shut the hell up. No, you do what's right. If it means that you're going to get sacked from a job, if it means you might get fired from the CIA and never work for them again because you're doing the right thing, then you do the right thing. And tactically, for them to not think that doing what they were doing was not tactically sound, was going to put people at a disadvantage, was going to get people killed, and we were going to lose equipment. Everything that we fight for and we try to achieve, we're going to lose all that. And just to say, well, I was ordered to not do well, then you know what? You need to have your rank stripped from me, and you need that Ranger tab Milley definitely pulled from me, because that's horseshit. And I agree.
That guy. Yeah, I completely agree with you. And it's like the fact that there has not been like the fact that there has no one's been held accountable. The person who has been held accountable for even just talking about Afghanistan is Schiller.
But we'll talk about it here, damn it.
Yeah,
we don't care.
That's the only person that has been held accountable for like something surrounding Afghanistan.
Amber, if nobody's going to get held accountable for them killing those Kabuli civilians for that drone strike, that was completely, that was murder. That was straight up murder or negligent homicide. Nobody's going to get held. You think anybody's going to get held accountable for leaving?
Righteous strike.
A righteous. Oh, we talked about that on this show when it happened.
Weeks and weeks and weeks to come clean on that. They knew right away. It was a secondary propane tank that exploded. They had it. They had video feed. They knew exactly what happened, and they didn't come clean about it for weeks. It was just such a political blunder. Like it was, you want to know what, like with the Afghanistan withdrawal, what we saw was a little peek behind the curtain. That's what everybody saw. And it was like, and then we saw, like damage control in terms with what they were trying to do. And there had to be some sort of agreement that there will not be a single person held responsible for Afghanistan, because that will only make us look worse if we admit some sort of failure. Instead, you still have Kirby talking about how it was a success in terms of the amount of people, the like biggest air evacuation. Okay, like what? Like good job. How about everything else?
Good
Yeah,
air evacuation.
and
Go ahead, Ian. I'm
no,
sorry.
I'm
to
just
cut
gonna, I
you.
mean, this is a perfect transition into what you're working on, and
Yeah.
this coming spring, you have a book coming out, which is Unfit to Fight: How Woke Politics Are Destroying Our Military. And as anyone who follows you on Instagram, which is at Amber Smith USA, and they check out the reels that you put up and stuff, you've been very vocal about all this stuff. I mean, in particular, I think you did a great one speaking about how all these 5-star generals we see on Fox News and CNN and MSNBC, they're all paid for by defense contractors. And it's like, of course, they're going to try to get us into more wars that have no benefit to the American citizen.
Yes, my new book, Fight, will be out in April 2024. I'm really excited about it. It sort of stems because I obviously, I pay close attention, national security, defense, military issues, and I've just seen how the military has changed fairly quickly in terms of my experience in the military, then going and seeing it as an official in the Pentagon, as a civilian, and then just seeing how quickly things have changed under the Biden administration. And though they really started, like it started changing under Obama, started to make some big policy sort of shifts that nobody was really paying that close attention to. But we've seen the effects of, like, we saw the Trump administration try to reverse some of that stuff. But like I said, the bureaucracy is so great that it is hard to do. And then as soon as like what they were effective at was quickly changed as soon as Biden took office, and it has just absolutely destroyed the military. A lot of the toxic, horrible, unaccountable political leadership and senior military leadership that has gone unaccountable for so long for these policies and enforcing these policies has seriously damaged the military, and in doing so threatened our national security. We are seeing the all-volunteer force be threatened for the first time since the end of the Vietnam War. You've heard about, the recruitment crisis in terms of the branches not being able to meet their numbers by tens of thousands. But like I said, it would soon be quickly followed by a retention crisis. We are just now starting to see the beginning of the retention crisis, of people jumping ship as fast as as their contracts will allow them to do so. And that's ETS and retirements. People are done with the current state of the military. And sadly, the military as a whole has also lost their number one recruiters, which is veterans. There's about 22 million veterans in America today. They used to be the number one free marketing tool that the military had. It was a family business. If you had a parent or grandparent served, you were that much more likely to serve. That has all changed because parents aren't recommending service to their children anymore. They don't trust it. They don't trust the leadership. They don't trust the wars. They see people being treated as cannon fodder. They don't want any part of that. You used to, join the military for patriotic purpose to better this country, but people are saying, for what? Why are we going over to countries to make their countries better when they see the disasters here at home? So the military, it's absolutely scary times, and sadly, it's not going to be anything that's going to change overnight. They can throw all the money in the world at this problem, and it may work temporarily, but this is going to be generational. People have seen the problems with the military, and they're not wanting to sacrifice for it.
No, and aside from going over and making other countries better, we never did, and I was especially even we always, and we make this analogy here, and I said we go to somebody else's house for a party and we fuck their house up, and then we leave it and say, you guys clean up your party because we're done here, and we did that a lot of Obama. We did that everywhere, and when you said he went under the radar, he got a lot of shit under the radar that people didn't pay attention, that was just egregious. I mean, we destabilized a ton of nations under him, and nobody's ever held him accountable for that. And it's sad because you're right. We can't, I can't very well tell my son, hey, yeah, I want you to join. I really, if he asked me to join the Rangers or go to the Army, I would say just give it a couple more years and let's see how it goes. Cause I don't want him to join right now because
Exactly.
it's not the safe place. It's not the discipline. It's not the place you go to become a better person. Like I did become a better person joining. Now
Same.
that's not the case anymore. And that's sad. That's sad. Were you able to talk to any of the generals, anybody in the upper echelons when you wrote your second book? And even off the record, if they're off the record, I guess you can't tell us. Well, you could, I guess, if you wanted to. But anything that they're seeing, anything on those upper, are they all just spouting the same stuff because they're that upper generals and they gotta fit the narrative. They gotta still tell the story that everything's great when we know it's not.
Yeah. So yes, it's too late. Like when you're an 06 or above, you have drank the Kool-Aid,
Good.
you're a politician. And that sadly is the way it is. It is about ladder climbing at that point, and it's not about the betterment of troops. It is about getting green squares, on your tracker, on your PowerPoint tracker that you have to send up to your boss. That's like the number one priority right there. And so, yes, like the whole leadership aspect, like I think a lot of people see it as a lie because they get told one thing by leadership and then they see something other, like the double standards, like even from someone at like General Milley, who I think people are tired of well, he's a general, so he gets to do whatever he wants. No, he's the leader of soldiers and he should be holding the standard and doing the exact same thing that he's expecting his lower level enlisted to do. And I think people are done with the like, oh, you're a king because you're a general. No, you're not. You're supposed to be like establishing this agency so we can fight and win wars and ensuring that we have the best training and resources in the world to do it. But instead you're doing media hits, you're prancing around in Washington, DC on the cocktail circuit, while everybody else is living in mold infested housing in thousands of structures across America. So I think people are done with that. Military families are done with that. And so back to your question of, are generals telling the truth or are they coming clean about this? No, they are not. They are towing the line. They're towing the political line at the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. to ensure that they get their next star. That's all that it means. And trust me, I have met some great ones who are still able to hold on for whatever reason, but they are few and far between. They are the exception and not the rule. So it's tough, and there's going to have to be some like big changes that we're not going to see, even if they sort of like are implemented. You can do things like administration to administration in terms of taking out executive orders that promote DEI and the sort of like conscious bias training and like sensitivity training, like those types of things that have sort of plagued the military, and people are tasked with doing more trainings in a month than there are work hours. Stuff like that you can change, but culturally it's
yeah, and as the civilian of the group, I see it constantly, because I'll tell you something that I feel like I've seen just in my adult lifetime, and I think everybody else has. It's kind of the obvious, is that after Don't Ask, Don't Tell was they got rid of it, which, by the way, I was all for. I mean, I'm very pro gay people being able to serve openly, but I remember there was a big argument by a lot of conservatives of, all right, this is going to open the door that you're going to have people like RuPaul serving in the military. And at the time I was like, that's ridiculous. It's never going to happen. I was definitely proven wrong, because of the Army constantly pushing the transgender stuff. And the thing, and I'm sure you talk about this in your book, but the thing that's crazy about it to me, right? And this is being completely unbiased of however you feel about, the transgender ideology and people transitioning and their appearance and all that. As, let's just say, a male, if you're Chris or anyone else in the military, you cannot use steroids, right? But if you're a woman transitioning to a male and part of that transition is using testosterone, male hormones. And it's just like, make any of this make sense, because it doesn't. And as you said, like, none of it is about winning wars or being more lethal.
Yeah, you are absolutely right. And like, I will say to like anyone trying to reason it or like make sense of it, just like honestly, just don't, because it makes no sense. Like when I was in the military, I feel like it was about you make sacrifices for the team, for the betterment of the team, to ensure that you guys are better able to accomplish the mission and you bring everybody's ass home. Now it's about, how are we going to ensure that you have special accommodations? What is going to make you feel better about yourself and safer? And like, there are safe spaces on our military academies, military academies. There are safe spaces. There's open discrimination against white men. Like there's one out of the Air Force, there was a fellowship that it said, if you were a cis white male, please do not apply. Like, could you just even like what is that telling people who are joining the military, that are serving in our country, are serving in our military, and they're just making everything about race, and then they're putting down people who are serving and like saying that they're not eligible. Like that used to be called discrimination. Now, like, I don't know what that is, or even racism. Like now I don't know. Now they're just making excuses for it if it benefits what they want to benefit, their agenda. So, and then there's also like a civics class actually at the Air Force Academy where people didn't know what their oath meant. Like people who were serving in the military said, even if they read their oath, they didn't actually like understand. So it was a class about what your oath means and essentially like why you're serving your country. And so really what that means is that it's lost on this younger generation about what it means to serve and why, like, how can they be expected to sacrifice and like potentially give their life for their country if they don't know what it means? Like, what are they fighting for? And they don't know. And I do think it's sad because when I was in the military, like what Chris said about, oh, the military made me a better person. It gave me all these skills and it taught me purpose and about myself and selfless service, all of these things. And what it means to actually be a member of a team. That doesn't mean, like in college, you sit in a group and you guys work on a project together, but to be a living team where people's lives are on the line and people are counting on you to accomplish something and to, be able, you have to carry a certain amount of weight to ensure that you're able to get your mission done safely and bring hopefully everybody back home. And today it's like, it's individuality is, I feel like, what is being taught in today's military, instead of you're going to have to put your differences aside and become one so we can work together and get this done. And that's like, I write a lot about this in my book, is that the military was amazing because it was like a meritocracy. It didn't matter if you were poor, if you were rich, if you went to college, if you didn't go to college, like what your level of education was, if your dad left, if your mom was an alcoholic, it didn't matter because you came into the military, stripped you down, and everybody grew together. And that's not so much anymore. It's like, let's focus on your uniqueness. And that is actual language, like in some of these memos I read, in terms of uniqueness. They want to focus on your uniqueness and what makes you different, and that should be celebrated.
No, not, and that makes the military weaker. The whole reason you go, that's why when you go in the military, I know they probably didn't do it to you. They should, though. It should be equal on all planes. They shave your head. They shave your head when you get there, when you're at your in-processing station, so you all start on that same fucking level. There's no individualism. You're all the same. You're all dirt bags. That's all you are. That's what you're going to start. You're going to stay on the same playing field. And then
something, right? It means
did.
something because you've all been through the suck together.
Exactly.
And then you get to where, you're at that level playing field. And then guess what? If you succeed, it's because you worked your ass off and you did something that made you stand out, or you got promoted or whatever. But like, Yeah, and even with women, and a lot of people can't talk about this or are scared to talk about it. But even with women, it has, I think things have changed. When I was in the military, I worked my fucking ass off there. I just got two for you.
Nice.
To ensure that people would take me seriously. And a lot of people don't like that. Like, oh, you shouldn't have to prove yourself. Yes, I did. I had to prove myself
Yes.
and prove that I could be there just like everybody else, that I could do my job and just like all the other men there. But I had to work very, very hard because my job was constantly under a microscope. So for years and years go by, and suddenly, and I write about this in my book, and this goes back to leadership doing things not for the betterment of the military, but for the betterment of their career advancement. A lot of senior level leaders wanting to have firsts. So I was the commander when the first woman graduated from Ranger School. I was the commander of whatever special operations unit that first had a female.
Which is, by the way, the exact same thing that's going on in government, right? It's the first black
mirrored.
female vice president, the first black
Mirrors.
lesbian female press secretary. I mean, but there's definitely truly there's going to be the first transgender Supreme Court justice.
5 feet tall. Yay.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, where does this line get drawn? But honestly, I do, as someone who served and, like I said, had to work my ass off on a daily basis for years to be taken seriously and to be valued as like a equal member of the team, which I got to, and I feel like I earned it. Now I think people, I think it's doing a disservice to women who want to be there and can be there for the right reasons. When things start getting blurred, when lines start getting blurred, or like, oh, are you here because that one commander was here and he wanted to make sure that, you know, he had a female and then she had to have a battle buddy. And then that's how things have gone. So it's a divider. Like, once again, it divides people and it creates resentment, just like with a PT test. I said, like, with a PT test, you need to have a mission standard. So if you're in the infantry, here's the standard, better meet it. Man, woman, whatever, I don't care. If you can't meet this standard, you can't be here. For aviation, guess what? I don't need to be held to as high of a physical standard as a ranger, as somebody that's in the infantry. But
the aviation, you still have that standard, regardless you're a man or woman. You have to be held that standard.
Yep. And the Army tried to do it. And guess what? The Secretary of the Army said, I fear this is going to hurt recruitment of women. And guess what? They changed it back to the gender specific training.
Yeah. So, and that's where they want to have their cake and eat it too.
Not training.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I cut you off. Say that again. Say it, Amber. I cut you off. Say that again.
No, I was just saying, so they changed it back to the gender specific testing. Testing.
And you can't have your cake and eat it too. That's what they're trying to do. I've always
the same with the draft.
It's horse shit, and it bugs the crap out of me, because when I joined, we were just as diverse, if not more, than today. But we didn't have to say anything. Believe me, in the infantry,
we appreciated and respected each other a whole lot more back then.
Oh hell yeah! Because guess what? I don't care if you were black. I didn't care if you were Chinese. I didn't care if you were Puerto Rican. And in the infantry, we got tons of Puerto Ricans. We got them everywhere. Can you pass the PT test? Can you shoot marksmanship? At least marksmanship at basic training. Then when you get to Ranger Battalion, can you shoot expert? Can you walk that 3 mile, 12 miles in 3 hours, the EIB standard? Can you do all the standards? Doesn't make a difference what you look like. Can you do your job?
Yeah. And the same with what I was saying about the draft is in Secretary Ash Carter, in the end of 2015, it was enacted in 2016, lifted the ban on women in special operations. Okay, that ban was what made the Selective Service Act, which required men from 18 to 25 to sign up for the Selective Service, constitutional, because it didn't discriminate against men because women couldn't serve in those positions. as soon as they lifted, and not just special operations, ground units as well.
Yep.
Combat units, I should say.
Yeah.
Once that was lifted, it was then like, but wait, the only reason women don't have to sign up for the draft is because they weren't allowed to serve in these positions. Now that they can, so this goes to your point of you can't have your cake and eat it too. Right now, that's exactly what's happening. And the same with transgenders. So, the military right now, like even the Navy, like talks about like pursuing legal action if you misgender someone in the military. But the Selective Service Act only recognizes your birth sex. So a transgender, wait, let me make sure I get this right. A transgender woman still has to sign up for the Selective Service. So, but transgender men do not. You can serve in the military as like your opposite sex. And so it's just the double standards are completely asinine. And it's like, it's so easy to see right through. It's like, oh, one is for political purposes. One is to appease society because they think that's what is popular right now. And the other one, the Selective Service that has to live in reality in case they have to start drafting people, they are the ones that get to live in reality and
So if a female that wants to be a man or is transitioning to a man, if we have a draft, they're no longer a man. They can say, well, I'm not a man. I'm a woman, so I can't get drafted.
so if they were born a man,
got you.
have to sign up for the Selective Service, and then potentially, if that, I personally do not think a draft could get in today. Like even if Congress approved it and they were like, let's go, like start drafting people, do the lottery, I do not think they could enforce it. That's what I don't think that they could do. I think a draft could happen in terms of Congress enacting draft. I do not think they could enforce it. I do not think for a second the people that you see on TikTok and Instagram within like fighting age would, I don't think they.
You're right. There's no way they could get people to we always have a war on police. Who's going to go and get all the people to come in? There's no way in hell. You're right. Okay. My head's wrapped around. Do you know of any? I doubt it. Ian, maybe you do. Because I really want to know on this draft thing. I want somebody to ask. Maybe I will if I ever meet one. A transgender, a female who's transitioning to a man. Ask them about that Selective Service question. Say, hey, guess what? If you're drafted, are you still a man, or are you going to go back to being a woman so you don't have to go to war? I want to ask one that. If nobody has, I will. If it's just not the circles I travel in, guys. I'm not being so discriminatory race. That's just not my circles. I don't. But if I do, I'd like to ask that question because I'd like to know the answer and a real accurate answer. Because I would put dollars to donuts. They would say, "No, I'm a woman. No, I'm not. I'm not a man anymore. I'm a woman. I'm not going to war."
Yeah.
And I don't know. That was
that comes down to is like, do you think China is dealing with that problem? Do you think Russia and Iran is dealing with that problem?
And here's can I just say, here's the irony is China, people don't realize this enough. China's creating this problem. There's a reason, truly. I mean, when you talk about TikTok, right? And the TikTok generation, this is a fact. And like, this has been discussed on many podcasts. And like, if you use the version of TikTok in China, which is not called TikTok, it's called something else, and you go to the Explore page and you're a child, they're showing you engineering, they're showing you science, they're showing you things that are, bettering your life. If you're in that same age bracket in the United States and you're 13, 14, everything is like, I'm a demigirl and I don't know what gender I am. And they're purposely fucking with us.
I agree. It's true. It's so true.
It's unconventional warfare. That's what we used to be the best at it.
Like destroying us from the inside out. Like a war isn't necessary.
That used to be our thing. PSYOPs was our thing. And there are countries that do it better than us now because of all those that were crying when Trump walked into their facilities. All of them crying because they're all worried about that, not worried about what's going on and fighting an unconventional war, which is what the intelligence agencies, the Pentagon, even though you got the ground guys there, we'll leave that to the SOCOM, and then also the European commands and all those commands out there. But the National Security Agency, the CIA, the FBI, they're supposed to be fighting those wars, and they're not. That's when you say they're crying when Trump walks in. They're more worried about if my feelings are going to be hurt than fighting that psyops war that we are losing badly right now. And we're seeing the repercussions from that as well. I wanted to ask you, I got one last thing. I know you got kids there. I know we talked all this, we've been saying some negative stuff, but I did want to ask you this, and hopefully you have it. If somebody comes to you, like I said, my daughter comes to you and says, I want to join, and what would be your recommendation? What would you say to a young lady or even a young man that comes in and says, hey, I want to join the military? And in this day and age, even though we've been poo-pooing it a little bit right now, and rightfully so, but both of us have had tremendous experiences from the military and serving and fighting in the global war on terror. We have. I loved it. I have tremendous memories from it. What would you tell them though at this point in time and in this day and age?
I love the military. It did so much for me. It put me on the path that I'm on. And I'm forever grateful to have gotten the opportunity to serve and the people that I served with. And it absolutely hurts me. And it took me a little while to get here, but right now, as the military is today, absolutely not.
Okay. And that's succinct, right to the button. And then
Don't like beat around the bush with it anymore. I've done, like I said, I just wrote an entire book on this, and I have done tremendous research. The military is targeting the standard people throughout history who have wanted to join the military, and they're telling them that there is something wrong with them, that they are the problem. And so, no, I'm not going to recommend to a young person to potentially have to go fight in a war for no reasons other than to prop up the defense industrial complex and make people a whole lot of money. When the military turns itself around culturally and with its leadership, and it is able to develop a strategy we have the best military in the world. We have the best equipment and technology in the world. You don't think we could go in and completely, absolutely win against any of the conflicts that we have been in recently and leave? Like we have that ability. Instead, we choose not to go in there and win, because the goal is not to win. The goal is to prolong however long the conflict can absolutely be. And it becomes careers, and it's like an entire like sub economy. And so no, when the military changes and goes back to being an agency that fights and win wars and puts that at the top of the list, at the top of their priorities, then absolutely. The military used to do fantastic things for people. It could take kids from the inner city that had no upbringing, no parents, no money, and completely gave them a life and gave them opportunity, completely changed the trajectory of their life, and did fantastic things for them. Sadly, I don't think that's what they're getting anymore. And I do think the negatives outweigh the positive today. And it's mostly because of the leadership and the policies out of this administration that have so quickly put it in a downward spiral.
You're the subject matter expert.
So it pains me to say so, but that's where I'm at today when you asked me about recommending it. And I used to, like you said, I wrote my book Danger Close it came out in almost 7 years ago. Absolutely. When I was doing promo for my book back then, I was still recommending the military back then, because like I said, it did such great things, and it hadn't completely, gone downhill the way it has now. And now with the things I've learned, the way they treated the military members in COVID with the COVID vaccines, like it is just, you are a tool for them, and that's about it.
I feel you. I wish I could dispute that. I can't. I mean, there's no way to do it. And you're spot on. I think somebody, I'm not a huge Trump fan. I'm granted, I'm never not a Biden fan by any means at all, but the way he handled Mosul and ISIS, to be honest with you, was perfect. It's like, bam, get in there, kill him, destroy him, get out. There it is, right there. We're done. And maybe it just didn't make enough money. So maybe that's just not. And listening to you now, I love, because I did work with a lot of those defense companies, and you're spot on, making millions, billions of dollars. And to see that it's even come to that now, not just the politics, but even just more so of lining generals' pockets. That's sad. That's sad. So I hope we can fix it. I really do.
Because like people will say like, oh, you said something bad about the military industrial complex. Like they create the equipment. We need them, right? Like they absolutely are necessary and they do good things. But what is bad is when they have allowed to use war to become a business model. That is where the failure arises. And that is what I'm absolutely against. Like we should have a military and an administration that leads it, where we go in, we fight, we win, we get out. That it's not this like drawn out thing where people in that industry are able to just have it be a moneymaker. And then it's like, let's just go stay at war forever because that's what's making us the big bucks. That's my stance on that.
I have one final question then, and I know Chris has to go, but everything that you're saying right now makes me wonder. As you said, when you put out Danger Close, you said I would recommend people go into the military. And I could be wrong in this because I really don't watch a whole lot of TV news, but I worked in news at the time. But I know you were regularly on Fox News, you were regularly on shows on Sirius XM that I worked on. You coming out now saying the things that you're saying, like at the very end here, I feel like goes against the establishment. You will not regularly hear people on the news, on any media outlets, say these things. So has it hurt your career to like not toe the line and be candid? Because I could tell these are your true opinions. You're definitely not being paid by a super PAC to tell us this.
Yes. So my stance now is that I'm like, this is my opinion. This is the truth. And I'm going to tell it like it is. I do think that it has shocked a lot of people, especially because I worked in national security in Washington, D.C. And I think that a lot of my peers and colleagues and people I've worked with before, at least in like the national security circles here in DC, are very, I think I've shocked a lot of people publicly speaking the way that I do. But I also sort of pride myself as to having never fallen into the DC national security establishment. We can get into foreign policy all day long, and I know we don't have time for that, but the national security establishment in Washington, D.C. is very powerful and very strong, and like the network is massive. So I will say that there are very few people who are speaking out publicly the way that I am, and are not just falling in line with like the next greatest thing. Like pay attention, people bouncing from, China to Ukraine to Israel. Like it's very weird when you start paying attention to people that are doing that.
Well, you can put a price on integrity. You can. I honestly believe that, and you should
Absolutely.
never. You should
I'm
never.
out on a whole lot, but just like you said, I sleep well at night, and I'm always going to tell the truth when it comes to that. And I think like even with the book that I wrote, it's some people who have read the book, it's not out yet, but some people are kind of like, okay, like that's like, wow, like in terms of like writing that. But I'm like, I genuinely care about the military. And I'm sure I'm going to get every hater in the world telling me, from reading my title, the exact opposite. But people who care about the military will want to fix it. And that means making some very drastic changes, not just going along with, the status quo. That's what's killing the military. And people need to start speaking out about it and not getting intimidated by those who are attempting to silence you by discrediting you. Because that's what happens in today's
Yeah.
world.
No,
As soon as you
you're-
say something that goes against the current, they try to silence you in that way. So
well,
Absolutely.
it should make you stronger. They're going to try to silence you. Then just talk more. I mean, right? That's what we want to do. We're the ones that go in there and we're shooting, we're killing things, we're blowing things up. Well, if they want to silence us, then let's just keep going after them. And you are a subject matter expert. You know, you've been there, you've seen the combat, you've done the training up the route for whether it's relaxing jacks or not. You were there, but then you went to Rucker, you're at 101st, and then you worked in the Pentagon directly.
okay,
So
flew in
you have-
Kiowa makes up for it. Okay.
I did want. No, we're gonna go. Well, hopefully we'll get you on.
Yeah,
again,
we'll
but
do.
there-
We'll
because-
you know what?
'cause
I
I
mean,
did
the
have a
book, as
question
you
about the
said, the
cover,
book
yeah.
is out in a few months. We'll definitely have you back on when the book comes out. So
if you want to come on, you don't have to, but if you'd like to come on, we'd love to
Great,
have
I'd
you.
love to be back on. You can pre-order it now. It's available on Amazon. It'll get delivered to you on publication date.
Yeah, are you
awesome.
gonna-
Yeah. So
are-
pre-order it, guys, which is Unfit to Fight, How Woke Politics Are Destroying Our Military. And you could order Danger Close as well, which is available everywhere. Officialambersmith.com, at Ambersmith USA on X and on Instagram. This was excellent. It was really great hearing your insight and all these things. And honestly, seeing your evolution as someone who, you know, had you on shows that I worked on many years ago and speaking very candidly about all this. So I love this.
Yes, it's nice to be able to speak freely. It's great.
You can say whatever the hell you want on this show, and we don't care. Believe me, we don't. And I love it because I like pissing off the straights and the politicians, and they can go suck a fat one. I could give a crap about the people in DC. I really don't. I was gonna ask a question on your website. Are the books signed? Can people get signed books from you?
So you can
She signed this one.
And that's
I don't know if you noticed the one she sent to us.
Well, I mean, I got, but those were
Danger
special,
Close, baby.
special. I know, I got mine up.
yes,
up
you can
there.
order a signed copy on my website. I'm just doing paperbacks right now, but yes.
Cool. I mean, that's a big deal. From writing books, people, and I love you for loving them. They love signed books. A lot of people
well,
collect
I
them.
appreciate the support. Yes, thank you so much.
Well, everybody should read it, and thank you for coming on, especially having those two little ones there watching Paw Patrol. Thanks, Amber and Ian. I got nothing, man, until the next time we get her on.
That's all for this episode of Battle Line Podcast. But we're always posting new content on social media. Follow us on Instagram at Battle Line Podcast and on Twitter at Battle Line Pod. That's an order. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any new episodes up every Tuesday. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or your podcast platform of choice. Believe in yourself. Face all challenges head on. And as always, never quit.